Take a little break from spiritual war here. Hard time. Manic Street Preachers have just re-released their 2004 album called Lifeblood. They've been doing this for a while, re-releasing on the anniversary of their albums. I think it's great. I wish every band did this, where they kind of do a little bit of remastering. They had demos, some live stuff, B-sides. They do deluxe editions of their albums, and they've done probably almost all of them by now, except for the newer ones. Even Gold Against the Soul, which was surprising because they don't like that album. I don't understand it because I do. That's the album that got me into them. My journey with them began, 1990. One of the guys in my band at the time, I was in a band that was like sort of a glam metal slash slightly punk, little slash Sunset Strip. And he collected demos, and he would look around, not just the LA bands, but around the world. And he'd come across the single for Motown Junk, and then later the Art Riot EP. And he played them to me. He was really into the Manics. He's like, "Yeah, they're great. You gotta check them out." And I did, and I'd listen to the stuff. And then eventually, when Generation Terrorist came out, he was talking about that too. I was out of the band at the time, though. I think I saw him somewhere, and he was telling me about it. But anyway, I'd heard it, and I'd seen it around. That first album that was released, their album Generation Terrorist in 1992, it was a debut double album, which is pretty ballsy. And they were like punk slash glam rock slash a little bit of Sunset Strip. They described themselves as Guns N' Roses meets The Clash, and that's pretty accurate for the early days. And I never picked up Generation Terrorist at the time. I liked it, sounded cool, but it wasn't like something I had to run out and buy. When that happened, when I got into them, was when WBCN, a radio station in the Boston area, started heavily playing, and FNX, which was another station, started playing La Tristeza de Guerra from the Gold Against the Soul album. It was the first single, at least here in the US it was, from that, and I just loved that song. Went out and got the Gold Against the Soul album, and since then I've been a Manic fan, so since '93, with varying degrees of interest. Like some albums I'll really get into, some I'll just, notice it's out and kind of maybe listen to a couple songs, and I've been in and out of fandom, but I've always been a fan and I've been aware of everything they've done. Now Lifeblood is an album that kind of passed me by at the time. At the time I was very busy with my own band, and I didn't really spend a lot of time looking at music at that time. Sometimes that happens, it's a keyboard elf situation. If you're doing it all day, you don't go home and eat cookies, so it was something like that. So it kind of passed me by originally. And then when I did discover it years later, I felt that it just, it was really cold, to me. I guess it felt like the This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours album, except with a little bit more synth. It was a little bit cold. It reminded me of Grace Under Pressure by Rush. I can't explain what that is, but it's just a cold sound. That's like a cold album. And I think they've said as much about that too. But so now I'm rediscovering it now, and I like it a lot. I kind of get it now more that I have the time to listen through it. And it has more of a through line to the other stuff. With them, it's like every record they do is usually a good percentage different than the one before it. Sometimes the records are a reaction to the one before it. And indeed, the album prior to Lifeblood an album called Know Your Enemy, was a bit like a reaction to the fact that since the disappearance of guitar player Richie Edwards in 1995, they had kind of become more arena rock, kind of AOR. They were charting singles, and they actually went from being an underground concern, which they were at the time which he was in the band, to a more mainstream act. And I think the feeling was they wanted to get back to their kind of roots. And the roots being, I mean, they're a weird dichotomy of ideas. They're very contradictory. They're a socialist rock band from Wales, and they have a lot of political lyrics. And but at the same time, they very much buy into all the trappings of rock and roll pomposity, and are very concerned with, or were anyway, with making magazine covers and having charting songs and being rock stars. It's like the Rage Against the Machine situation on steroids. But they don't get the same heat for that. Mainly because they don't have as many eyes on them. They do in the UK. And the UK, they're pretty big. In America, they're virtually unknown. Why do people walk up my house like that? I don't understand that. There's so much room out here, guys. So anyway, yeah, they're quite a contradictory proposition. They began, like I said earlier, as like a glam metal, pseudo Sunset Strip band with a lot more punk affectations, and that was the first album. And then they never really sounded like that again. On the second album, the one I got into, Gold Against the Soul, they went for a little bit of more grungy thing, because that was happening at the time, but it was more sort of mainstream, like the production job. I think the guy that did the first album was Steve Brown. What was his name? I'll put it up there. He produced the first two albums, and he took a lot of the edges off their sound. I felt like he kind of well, then that's what they were looking for. They wanted that big rock sound, but I think by Gold Against the Soul, they'd sort of more were gunning a bit more for mainstream. They had largely abandoned the sloganeering that they originally had when they started. They used to stencil provocative political terminology and things across their bodies with stencils. They wore a lot of makeup and all this other stuff. That kind of, they stopped doing that and kind of got a little bit more normal, or, you know, as normal as a socialist band from Glasgow. Not Glasgow, oh my God, from Wales. Did I say Glasgow before? Why am I confusing them with Gun? Entirely different proposition, but also great. Fuck, I love Gun too. They have a new album. I'll talk about that soon. But yeah, so they're always a weird thing. And I think in America, I mean, I think that the reason they didn't take off in America has a lot to do with their very first, the way they were introduced to the country. They didn't have good marketing over here. I guess Sony, which was their label in America, didn't really know what to do with them. And surprisingly, they're still on Sony now. Like when they first got signed to them, it was like there was an 8-album deal, which if you know a little bit about the music business, that's not good. Sounds impressive, but it's not. You don't want that. But yeah, they're still with Sony, and you know they do very well in Europe and in the UK and other markets. I'm talking hit singles, top 10 albums, and they do this while remaining virtually unknown in America. But to just touch on the Richie thing, Richie Edwards was sort of the leader of the band. He was the spokesman, the main focal point, the guy that came up with all our ideas, wrote all the lyrics, along with bassist Nicky Wire. They shared some lyric writing, I guess, but the main brain trust of lyrics was Richie. He disappeared in 1995 or 1994? Could have been the end of 94 going into 95. They're on the verge of an American tour. Richie just kind of disappeared. And even though he was sort of seen as a leader, he didn't really know how to play guitar. He was usually, and I know some Manic fans will protest, but I mean, show me the evidence of him fucking being plugged in. He was like the Sid Vicious type of character. He was very much image-wise the focal point and the spokesman, but he just really jumped around on stage with guitar. Anytime James Dean Bradfield, the main guitar player and singer of the band, anytime like his guitar would go out, you just hear nothing. you hear Nicky playing bass. That was about it. So he wasn't a musician really, in the sense that he made any contribution to music. So when he left the band, when he disappeared, the sound didn't change, or it didn't affect the sound changed, but his disappearance didn't affect the sound originally, because it was always really just the three guys, you know. So prior to him leaving the band was very much it's always been political, and it's maintained its political editorializing, but he was like a lot more about putting things to the edge, you know. He was more about seeing how far he could go lyrically, and a lot of stuff. He wrote some really out there lyrics, really extreme, and he also got the band to look extreme. You know, the last album he did with them, the Holy Bible, they had a great look. It was like military glam rock. It almost reminded me of like the Alice Cooper Special Forces period. In fact, it was very much like that. And he was sort of the driving factor. Go over here. He was the driving factor behind the whole thing of that. And then when he was out of the band, they kind of didn't have an image really. Excuse me. So, you know, while the music didn't change fundamentally, their kind of whole thing did. Like their whole image and their whole lyrical bent kind of changed, got less extreme, less he was very nihilistic. He's a big Nietzsche guy. He's a poet, and he's a real complicated character. And some people claim, even though he was pronounced dead in 2008, some people say he's still alive. And in fact, fans had seen him, or they said they seen him. They made sightings of Richie after he supposedly disappeared. People had spotted him at places. So, I don't know. I think maybe he was a real fragile guy. And I think maybe he just got, I don't know, maybe tired of the whole thing and just kind of left, you know what I mean? Like he kind of just got out of it, and that's the way it remains to today. So with him going, the band really changed as far as their sound, whereas by the time they made the last Richie album, Holy Bible, it was not very commercial. You weren't really going to get those songs on the radio. Musically, they were really angular. When the Holy Bible first came out, I didn't like it. I was like, what the fuck is this? Because I had no point of reference for it. I wasn't really into post-punk like I am now. Now it's like probably my favorite overall genre. But the bands I like the most are considered probably post-punk. I think. I don't know. Who knows? I haven't really sorted that out. But yeah, I didn't get it. I was like, this is just dark. There was a couple rocking songs on it, but it just didn't, I hadn't heard something like that before at the time. Now I love it. Of course, I think it's great now. It's one of my favorite albums from them. And again, much like Generation Terrorists or Gold Against the Soul, it doesn't sound like anything else they ever did. So after the Holy Bible and his disappearance, they made probably to this day what is their biggest album sales-wise, called Everything Must Go, which was like how can I use a hacky way of saying it? if the Holy Bible was like this wild kind of incident or a riot, Everything Must Go was recuperation. You know, it was more like a breath after that. It was a lot more laid back. It had a lot of beautiful stuff on it. That music breathed a lot more. There was a lot more space. Like, especially with the vocals, where a lot of times on the Holy Bible, he's just just getting words in it, but he was very wordy. And, like, the most important thing to him, and them as well, to a certain degree, was the lyrics and getting the messages in there. They're a very big message band. So he would always be kind of spitting out lyrics. It's a whole different thing on the Everything Must Go album. And with that album, they went from being sort of an underground cult band concern to a mainstream act in most parts of the world. Again, America. It's weird. Like, at the time, like I was saying, they were playing Electricity Era on local radio near me. After that, I never heard them play it on the radio ever again. No, a lie. When This Is My Truth, Tell Me Yours was being released, If You Tolerate This, Then Your Children Will Be Next, did get quite a bit of play on WFNX, which was sort of the alternative rock station near me at the time. It doesn't exist anymore. I don't think any of those stations do. I don't know, radio station. I don't know if there is a radio station anymore even. I mean, or shortly there won't be. That just play. I mean, what's the point, you know? But yeah. So their albums are all real different, and it's one of those kind of bands that, and that's why I like the Damned too. I usually like a lot of bands like that have really wild, differing sounds. Like if you listen to the first Damned album, it sounds nothing like Phantasmagoria 5 years later. You wouldn't know it was the same group. The Manics are like that. But as time has gone on, you can find the through line and the similarities in their material. Up at their last album came out a couple of years ago, the Ultra Vivid Lament, which I'm still kind of working through. I find the newer material, kind of, a lot of it sounds derivative to me of them, kind of. But then after I hear it enough, I kind of start to hear the difference in the tracks, and their melodies kind of come through. It's a lot of, the newer material is really slow burn, while their earliest stuff was very immediate. Here's the hook, here's the riff, here's the hook again, here's the riff again, you know, here's a cool middle 8, and then fucking riff, hook, chorus out the door. This new stuff is, the tracks, although they're not all that much longer in length. Like I said earlier, there seems to be a lot more space and a lot more consideration to the vocal. The melodies are a bit more complex. You know, it's not something that you stop listening to and you're walking around the house singing it. It's something, if you keep with it, in a couple weeks you'll be singing it. And then it'll feel like, you know, oh, of course, you know, it'll just seem obvious. But it takes a little work. And I think maybe that could be part of why, you know, they still haven't found success in America. In America, people tend to like something to hit them in the face. You know, they want to be wow, you know, right off the bat, off the jump. And the Manics, they have a different method of getting under your skin. It takes a little bit of work. And I don't think people like to work when it comes to music these days. Well, look at the fucking charts today. You know, there you go. They want something immediate, and the Manics aren't like that. But famously, they stated that on before the release of their first album, Generation Terrorist, and it was tongue-in-cheek, but they, you know, repeated a lot. They said they were going to sell millions of copies of the first album. I think it was 16 million, and then they would break up. This is, of course, probably Richie's idea, because his idea was that they had never seen a band sacrifice themselves. Like he liked the idea of a group attaining massive mainstream success and then breaking up. Like, we don't want it, you know. That's very Richie. Now, would they have done that? I doubt it, you know, because once you get into a situation they got into, and you're with a major label like Sony, and, you know, people's jobs are on the line, they would have just, the label would have replaced every one of those guys and put new people in there and just kept it going, because you have other people's livelihoods at stake then, especially if the album was to sell 16 million albums. That there's no way they would have been able to stop. It would have been over their dead bodies. And no fucking pun intended. Well, we don't know if he's dead. I like to think he's out there somewhere, wandering around. But yeah, Lifeblood is, it's got the same kind of job that their other reissues gotten. I think it's 2 CD. Well, yeah, I was trying to remember if it was 2 or 3 CD. I think it's just 2 on the CD tip. The vinyl is probably 4, I'm imagining. And it has the Lifeblood album. I'm pretty sure it's remastered. Yeah, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to conclusively go on the record and say it's remastered. And it's got all the demos and the B-sides. Now, demos, I don't, it used to be with me in bands and demos, I'd listen to them once out of curiosity and then never listen to them again. Now I don't even listen to them once. I don't have time for demos. I don't care. It's like, hey, this is the song when it wasn't good enough to go on an album, check it out. So, I don't care where are we going? That road's a dead end. I mean, I don't know, whatever, that's me. But I like the B-sides. And the thing about B-sides, right, but there was less B-sides. I think there was some for Lifeblood, but by the time you get to the next album, Send Away the Tigers, I don't know what the B-side situation was, because singles in America are a completely different proposition. Rainbow, it's always a rainbow over there somewhere, usually over here, but there it is, are a completely different proposition than in the UK. In the UK, even up until, I guess now it still happens sometimes, bands will release just a single. And you'll be able to get it in all different formats. And, well, normally 12-inch, right? And they'll put like 2, sometimes 3 extra tracks on it. In the 90s, Oasis was really well known for putting great songs on the B-side. So Suede's the same way. Suede actually just did a tour with the Manics together. They toured the U.S. too. I mean, they don't come out here. But then again, this isn't the U.S. But yeah, in America, you'd only see a single from an album if it was a song that was on the album. And most times, it would just be another song from the album on the B-side. And that's how it's always been in the U.S. It's just a different way of doing things. But if you live in the UK, you get a bunch of new songs. And sometimes, releasing a single is like a legitimate release. In America, if you release a single, they'd be like, oh, well, when's the album coming out? Is this the first single? It would cause confusion. It's not, it wouldn't be good for the marketing strategy for any band to release a single. And, okay, that's it. They go, what? So they're more used to it in the UK and other parts of the world. So, long story short, Lifeblood has B-sides, but each release is going to have less as it goes on, because now, as everything's released kind of digitally is the main thing, they're all standardized, so there's not so much of a difference in formats from territories, so the B-side thing is kind of gone the way of whatever goes away. And the Manics have a great B-side anthology called Lipstick Traces, which doesn't have all the B-sides, but it has most of the good ones. Most of the ones you want to. And then there's another one called Sleeping Next to Plastic. We also have a lot of B-sides and rarities and stuff. They have 2 compilations like that, which is definitely worth checking out. But if you're new to the band, what would you start with? Shit. I would get National Treasure. It's the greatest hits album. It's a double, but it gives you a good overview of the whole thing. They have another greatest hits album that came out 10 years prior. That it's one album. It's not as good, but yeah, National Treasure. But to start with a full record, just start with Generation Terrorists, because no one album is indicative of their sound. You'll hear threads from different parts throughout their catalog, but just start from the beginning. Unfortunately, if you really like that album, well, there's not another one like it. So, but the things that you will like, or I think you would like about it, is the musicians themselves. James Dean Bradfield, great singer, guitar player. He's like, he's a good through line, you know, to have on material. I'm just kind of seeing what's going on over here. It doesn't matter where I stand. There's always a coffee cup wherever I go. I don't know why. No, Jesus. See what happened? I came over, there's no one here. Now there's, retreat. Retreat. Oh, I'm going to go. Get the fuck out of here. That dude. That's why I don't do Schizo Rush episodes anymore. I get mauled. Until next time. Thanks for dropping in, and don't blame the teacher. Blame the school.